How do I know that my 3D print has failed while it's printing? Hi, I'm Katie and welcome back to Nerdic Inspiration. If you're new to the channel, my content is focused on tabletop gaming related crafts and nerd culture themed art projects. For those of you that are returning to my channel, this video is mostly going to be about 3D printing, but don't fret, I have a big crafting video in the works that is going to be out very soon. It has taken me quite a long time to make because I am literally making everything that is in it. So I'm hoping it's a pretty cool video when it comes out, and if you want to see it, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you're a patron, then you already know what I'm talking about because there's a ton of behind the scenes content on my Patreon right now, where I've got videos of me actually working on this project behind the scenes of filming it and producing it and crafting it and all the cool stuff. And I'm pointing over here because it's over there and you guys can't see it, but you can see it if you're a patron on my Patreon. So go check out Patreon. Thanks. As the 3D printing space continues to grow, there are a lot of new people coming into this space with a lot of questions about troubleshooting and diagnosing 3D printing issues. How do I know my 3D print is failing before it actually finishes and fails? Let me preface before you keep watching because I value your time. This video is meant for new printers, so if you are a seasoned printer in this space and you know what you're doing, you might not find this video super helpful. Also, this video is only about resin printing, so if you're looking for tips on filament printing, this is not the video for you. I will not be offended if you click out now. During the printing process, how do you know that this thing is working? Right? Like, you see everything moving, you see the machine operating, but how do you know that the print is not dying and screaming inside of this machine? Well, the first thing you can do is pause the print. Now, this is gonna sound kind of obvious as I'm saying it, but a lot of people don't know that this functionality exists on their printer, especially when they're brand new to printing, and they don't always know what to use it for, right? You might think that there's a pause button if you want to stop a print, but why would I want to do that? This is a reason you might want to do it. By looking at your LCD screen, you can tell what layer and how long your print has been printing for. So you can get an idea of exactly when you should pause it. And by hitting the pause button on your printer, your build plate will lift out of the vat high enough that you can actually see what is sticking to that build plate. So basically you can visually identify, did this thing stick to the build plate and does it look like it's working? You can also look at your vat and identify if there's anything floating around in there or any little bits and pieces. If you want to go an extra step, you can also take a plastic scraper and not scrape the vat, but just literally lift it above the vat, drop it in, and lightly drag it to see if you feel any little bits. Now, if the print looks good and doesn't look like there's anything failing, you don't need to do that. But if you see something off about the print, even when it's adhering to the build plate this early in the process, that's where you can maybe go that little extra step and say, I'm gonna check on this before I keep going. Then you just simply need to resume printing and it will keep printing your model, and you've got that peace of mind knowing, okay, so far, so good. Of course, if you're printing something really big, maybe you do this a second time when you get halfway or 3/4 the way through to make sure that it still looks good. By doing this, you've saved the time of having to print all over again and now figured out you had an issue earlier. You've also saved yourself from having to clean up a complete mess. And you saved yourself the cost of resin because you're not wasting it to print a failed print. An alternative to pausing altogether is actually adjusting your settings during slicing to have it so your build plate lifts higher after every time it dips into the resin vat. So every time it dips, when it lifts a little bit higher, that gives you better visual clarity of if it's actually sticking to the build plate or not. Now, this is gonna greatly increase your print time, so I would recommend not doing this and instead just using the pause method. Another great tip is listening for noises. And this is another one that seems super obvious. You'll hear kind of laboring from the gears, and you're also gonna hear crunch sounds. And when I say crunch, I mean like literal crunch. Like, it sounds like bones are crunching under this thing. It is a horrific sound, and you can always hear it when something is failing and it is pushing against something that it shouldn't be pushing against, or a piece of already cured resin that is properly attached to the build plate is now pushing into a piece of resin that was a dingleberry in that vat. If you hear a crunch sound, you should pause your print, lift it up, and check what is going on. This is another tip. It's a little out there, but it is something that you could consider doing, and that is using a plastic vat. So I use metal vats. I love the metal vats, and I'm not saying use a plastic vat because it's better, but one thing a plastic vat gives you is a little bit more visibility because they are clear. So Elgoo has plastic vats that you can get. You can use them as secondary vats, so you have more than one vat for more than one resin color. You could just use it as a replacement maybe while you're changing out FEPs. Extra vats are always great. But the plastic vats, you can actually see through them a little bit. So if you wanted to try using that lift method or something like that, you can at least see what's going on. You can also potentially identify things floating around a little bit better with a plastic vat, because you could see if there was like a little piece of something that kind of stuck to the side or has kind of lodged to somewhere. It's a little bit easier to identify when it's plastic and clear versus in a metal vat where everything's very dark when you have the resin in there. Now, one note for when you have floating bits or dingleberries in your little resin vat, you might feel the urge to get lazy and just kind of use that scraper method to go along there, or use like silicone tools. I know a lot of people use kitchen tools to kind of scoop out different things in the resin vat to avoid having to clean the whole vat. I get that, and it's very tempting, but especially as a new printer, it's always good to just be overly cautious and clean the entire vat. Strain the vat, check the bottom of the FEP, because there's a good chance that you're gonna have very, very tiny particles that failed, especially when you have those micro failures, and they get stuck at the bottom of the vat. And every time your build plate is going down, it's pushing those particles against your FEP, causing dents in the FEP, causing small pieces to get lodged in the FEP, and they could also create small holes. And if you're not kind of testing your FEP or your resin vat with water and seeing if it has holes in it, which a lot of people don't do until they think something failed, then you won't know those holes exist until you go to print your next print, and then all of a sudden you have resin on your LCD screen. The model that I was actually test printing in this video is a model that's kind of like a proxy army for Age of Sigmar Night Haunts. They're also just really great spoopy models for October if you're looking at doing a spoopy campaign for D&D or anything like that, that you need banshees and wraiths and haunted things for. So if you're interested in that, those models are going to be released in September. I am one of the very few sellers that is authorized to print and even paint these up for you and sell them. So if you're interested, check out my website /shop and you can see a featured photo of what they're gonna look like. And then check my shop back in September to actually place an order for these models. I know that video was pretty simple, but I really wanted to focus on that specific question of how do I know my print is failing as the printer is running, or when that print is already started. If you guys have any tips that I didn't mention that you think could help with this problem, leave them in the comments below so that we can all get better together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video if you enjoyed it or found it helpful. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see pictures of what I'm working on outside of YouTube, follow me on Instagram @NerdicInspiration to stay in the loop.